I could ask for the pallbearers to come forward, please. Anyone that's going to ask for the pallbearer. We're going to ask for the family to be seated on the chairs, please, and ask everyone else to gather behind. Please keep in mind social distancing if you're not living in the same dwelling. We're about to begin our service.
Yeah, I think it's probably.
I'll ask that everyone please take a moment to make sure that your cell phones are turned to their quiet mode. We are live streaming the service, so please be mindful of the camera in the back. Conducting our service today is Rabbi David Minkus and Cantor Rachel Rosenberg. It's at. Oh.
Okay, now? Can you hear me? Yeah. Song for Ascent. I turn my eyes to the mountains. From where will my help come? My help comes from Adonai, maker of heaven and earth. Adonai will not let your foot give way. Your guardian will not slumber. The guardian of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. Adonai is your protection, a guardian at your right hand. By day the sun will not strike you, nor the moon by night. Adonai will guard you from all harm and guard your life. Adonai guards your going and coming, now and forever.
The Jewish people respond to death with 3 words of blessing. In English, the words mean, praise is the judge of truth. So I ask that we begin our service with the wisdom of our tradition. Please repeat these words after me. Baruch Dayan HaEmet. Praise is the judge of truth. Adonai Natan v'Adonai Lakach, Yehi Shem Adonai Bevarach. Adonai has given and Adonai has taken. Praise be the name of Adonai. In the words of Ecclesiastes, a season is set for everything, a time for every experience under heaven, a time for birthing and a time for dying, a time for dancing and a time for wailing, a time for speaking and a time for silence, a time for seeking and a time for losing. The time of mourning is a complicated time, filled with many emotions and memories, both bitter and sweet. We begin our service with a recitation of Psalms, thus linking Max Katz's life with the 3,000-year-old tradition of the people of Israel and the eternity of God. I'll ask that you turn to your pamphlets and we'll read the 23rd Psalm together. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. I'll ask Shirley to come up and share some words written by her sister Estelle, who joins us via the live stream.
The words of Estelle. Since I'm turning 71 next month, I realize, even with my impossible math skills that Dad tried so hard to bolster, that the person who has known me the longest, 71 years in fact, is my father. His older sister Ruth has also known me the same number of years, but since she didn't have the pleasure of living with us, she doesn't know me as well as he did. We went through a lot over the years, Dad and I, and if he ever wished he had a son, I may have come closest. He was very European and refined, whereas I was a barbarian. For instance, we all had to wait at the table till Dad lifted his fork before we could raise ours and start eating. He insisted on fedora and decorum. We could not ever have our elbows on the table. It seemed unfair to me because other families didn't have it. My friends were a little in awe of him and a little afraid too. Probably because he was so quiet, they never could guess what he was thinking. Chess problems, bridge moves, or when we would all leave the house so he could have some peace and quiet. But he always had high hopes for all of us girls, and stuck with us even when he didn't know where we were headed. When I vied for a chance to travel abroad with the AFS, as part of the application process, both applicant and a parent teacher needed to submit an essay. Mine was a typical 17-year-old starry-eyed, hopeful effort. But I always felt that the main reason behind my winning the chance to go abroad was my father's literate, beautiful essay, for which I always have felt grateful. We only had to cry for 2 or 3 hours before Dad broke down and allowed us to get a puppy from a neighbor's litter. Even though, when off to college we all went, guess who ended up caring for Kathy? I loved singing in the car with my father, mother, and sisters on our frequent trips into the city to visit relatives. Some of Dad's favorites were Funiculi, Funicula, Trailer Jacques, my darling Clementine, and I've got sixpence. There was some lusty singing going on in that car, and I can still hear Dad's voice above all of ours, full and strong. Somehow my sisters and I have joined choruses and sung in them for many years. So though I fought my father at just about every turn, I must admit he really influenced my life for the good, and I know he will continue influencing all of our lives and our children's and even our grandchildren's in the years to come.
Thank you, Shirley, and thank you, Estella. Invite up next is other daughter, Cynthia.
My father was an extraordinary man. As I look back at his life story, I realize that although he was a very private, quiet, reclusive individual, he overcame many obstacles to lead an exemplary life. My father entered this country in his mother's belly on a boat from Eastern Europe in 1920. His parents settled in the Jewish ghetto of the Lower East Side of Manhattan in New York City. His father was a tailor, and although they were extremely poor, my father always said he didn't know they were poor because his parents created a loving, clean, and safe home for him and his two sisters. Somehow his parents scraped together enough money to buy a piano, paying for it in monthly installments. Lessons were arranged for his older sister Ruth, but my father managed to teach himself to play, eventually becoming an accomplished classical pianist. When my father's father contracted tuberculosis and was sent to a sanatorium, this placed an even greater burden on the family. My two aunts went to work at a young age to help the family make ends meet. When my father first started school, he spoke only Yiddish. Because he couldn't speak English, his teacher decided he was ignorant and sat him in the back of the classroom with the, quote, dunces. But my father soon proved everyone wrong, learning not only to speak English, but to speak flawlessly with perfect grammar and pronunciation. He was extremely intelligent and proceeded to skip ahead in school through the New York City Regents exams program. Although he was smart and an avid student, my father was also a mischief maker. His sisters told us many stories of the sneaky escapades he perpetrated. The Katz family eventually moved up to the Bronx, where they were part of another Jewish enclave. It was there we met my mother, who was part of a tight-knit group of neighborhood friends. Being quiet and shy, my father allowed my very outgoing mother to encourage the relationship. This was the start of a beautiful friendship which then turned into a wonderful marriage which lasted 73 years. They truly adored each other. Due to his outstanding intellect, my father tested into City College of New York, which he was able to attend for free. It was the only way he could go to college. He graduated with a bachelor's degree in chemistry. My father served in the Signal Corps during World War II, somehow missing out twice on being shipped overseas due to serendipitous circumstances. He was stationed at Fort Monmouth, New Jersey. When he first started his job search, my father came up against the Jews need not apply roadblock. He eventually found employment through the U.S. government, which had restrictions against discrimination. He began his long career working at Fort Monmouth as a research chemist. My parents bought their first small house in Middletown, New Jersey, and later built a novel, modern split level in Little Silver. There, my sisters and I grew up. Although my father was very private and reclusive and a strict disciplinarian, he was also a good and loving parent. He loved to read us stories, take us trick-or-treating, sledding, ice skating, and to see fireworks. He drove us to music lessons and ballet classes and taught Shirley to play piano. He took us on driving vacations through New England, leading us in rousing songs in the car with his wonderful, strong bass voice. Occasionally, he joined us on our summer beach days, diving with us through the ocean waves. He enjoyed playing tennis and ping pong and watching the World Series. He brought us the first in a long line of Katz family cats when he brought home a black kitten from work, which we named Ebony. My father was disappointed that he couldn't afford to pursue an advanced degree. He said he would have liked to have studied physics, but although his career path was based upon his strong abilities in math and science, he had many other interests. He had a great love of language and was a wordsmith. He very much enjoyed wordplay and puns. He was an inveterate creator of limericks. In the last few months of his life, he liked to call the situation with the pandemic a masquerade.
Oh.
He was a connoisseur of music and the arts. He and my mom attended numerous concerts and the ballet. He practiced photography for many years and created a dark room in his den in New Jersey where he developed his own photographs. He was also a brilliant chess player. When he couldn't find a strong enough opponent to play against, he would play games from books and newspapers. He could play speed chess and he could play blindfolded. Later in his life, he became an expert at solving the Rubik's Cube. My parents were frugal, and due to a good government pension, my father was able to retire in his early 50s. As soon as my sisters and I had grown up and left home, my parents began traveling and continued to travel all over the world for many years. They sold their house in New Jersey and moved to Orlando, Florida, where they enjoyed their time in the sunshine. My father inherited his father's skepticism about religion. He once told me he was probably an agnostic. He rarely attended synagogue, but he remained devoted to Yiddishkeit and to his Jewish heritage. He was fluent in Hebrew and conducted many of our seders flawlessly. Though quiet and shy, my father had a sly and clever sense of humor. He loved to joke with his coworkers. While traditional in some ways, he was a rebel at heart. He was a man of strong convictions. He had a deep-seated sense of morality and manners and doing what's right. He was devoted to his family. He set high standards for himself and others and could be sharply critical of those who didn't measure up. He was private and independent-minded and liked to do things his own way. He did not like being treated by doctors and hospitals. The day before he died, the nurses at his place of residence labeled him non-compliant because he wasn't following their instructions. That was my father. He did things his own way. A man with a brilliant, inquisitive mind and unwavering principles, he charted his own course. Finally, what my father taught me: the tremendous importance of education and knowledge, the value of an inquisitive mind and critical thinking, to see both sides of an argument and to question everything, to always be honest with others and with oneself, and to respect everyone, no matter their differences, the importance of family, an enduring love for music and the arts. For these things I will be forever grateful.
Thank you, Cynthia. As a rabbi, I'm gifted a special perspective. I'm able to see that no one is one thing and that people defy labels. When I sat with Max's daughters, Shirley, Estelle, and Cynthia, they spent time telling me about their father. The word quiet or reserved came up many times, but so did rebellious, and, as Cynthia just pointed out, non-compliant, which I really love. So it's transforming that medical note. He was an old-school parent of the post-World War II era, whose quiet demeanor, a person who never complained but demanded respect and the attention of his household. And he was a father who would drive you across the state to get the best musical lessons, to drive all the way to Newark to pick out a great dress, even if that was a great dress only in the mind of an 8th grader. Max was, for most of his life, a suburbanite, but only if you are judging by the facts on the ground. He never got used to wildlife or the not-so-wild animals that surrounded their central New Jersey home. Max, like so many Jewish children of that era, did not know English until he showed up at kindergarten. His teacher, lacking in perhaps awareness or imagination, but certainly empathy, placed him in the back row and assumingly saddled him with low expectations. I like to think that he saw that teacher's face as he excelled through school, getting a scholarship to what was once referred to as the Jewish Harvard, City College of New York. I like to imagine that he thought of that teacher when people would think that his children were British because of their polished and cared language skills that he was very careful to instill. I certainly think that at least on a subconscious level, that teacher was on his mind when he was a civilian working for the Army whose interests did not align with what his interests did not align to what they were demanding of his work. Working at Fort Monmouth, he was interested in research. So this is what he did. When he was asked to justify some of his research projects, he did not go outside of the chain of command, but simply showed his paper that cited heavily the work of Titus Varnicus, non-compliant. Sometimes the labels we are given are small and defy the significance at which we ascribe them and the meaning that they import into our lives and the people around us. Max was bookish, but was also possibly a bit of a ruffian as a child. Played tennis, and well into his 50s could leap over a park bench on the boardwalk because, well, he was able to. And he was full of surprises. He worked for the government. And as a Jew, this might have set him apart. But he would not share the secrets or give up an inch when he was summoned in the 50s by the investigators of McCarthy. He was loyal and strong. As we heard, he was in the Army Signal Corps during World War II. But at one point went AWOL, to where we don't know. But he was liked well enough by his peers to cover for him. And this brings me to two more descriptors that are most accurate. That of a husband and blessed. Blessed probably for many reasons, but none more so than his deployment. Rather than shipping out to an important but incredibly deadly war, he was on his honeymoon with his beloved Bella. She was the more outgoing one, and the one who organized much of their robust social life, compelled their relation forward in the early days when they met by knowing each other's siblings. He followed along with their social group, who called themselves Fortnighters, and then in Florida when they created a whole new group, this one around their shared love of music. He loved Bella, adoring her and always enjoying her company from those early days in the Bronx to New Jersey to their now famous strolls around a pond in Florida, which were captured by the local media, which he eagerly showed me when they moved to Chicago. They were both blessed with 3 daughters who they taught to live dignified and purposeful lives. Sadly, another accurate descriptor would be lonely. He spent the better part of 73 years with Bella, more than one home and a robust love, bringing 3 children, 7 grandchildren, and 5 great-grandchildren into the world, blessings and beauty and meaning that would not have existed had they not met. Bella died just before Passover 2 years ago, and these last 2 years have been a lonely and unwanted period of wandering. This week, our Torah reading cycle, we meet our patriarch Abraham, but not the charismatic man of faith, not the man who heard a voice and followed it, and not the man who walked the path of God at his family's expense. We meet a very human and broken Abraham, as he is seeking a burial plot for his beloved Sarah. Some in our tradition believe that his actions literally broke his wife's heart. I love seeing this Abraham in all of his humanity, not the lonely man of faith or the righteous man of our tradition that that our tradition refers to as Abraham Avinu, Abraham our father, but a man we can all recognize and see in ourselves. At the end of the portion, he too passes away, and two scarred, emotionally wounded, and distant brothers come to bury their father. And I think of this story because it feels like we are living the very opposite right now. Maybe that is one of the enduring moments and meanings of the Torah, where it literally teaches us. Max did not follow big voices in the sky, but was fully tethered to the ground he stood up. And he did not walk, or until 2 years ago, drive this earth alone, but with those he loved, and more importantly, those who loved him. So children are not gathering here today after years of not seeing each other, but with love and fondness for each other and for their father. May we all follow that journey, follow that voice and that leadership. And may Max's memory always be for a blessing.
Now rise for the memorial prayer. El Malera. El Malera Hamim. Shofen Bameromi. Hamse Menufanafona. Kafat Hamse. Hashina. B'ma'alot kedoshim utovim kezoar harakiyah masirim et nishmat Mordechai Yosef ben Chanoch HaKohen v'Sarah שהלך לעולמו בגן עדן שמנוחתו אנא בעל הרחמים הסגירהו בסתר כנפך לעולמים וצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתו Adonai hu nachalato v'yanuach b'shalom al mishkapo v'nomar Amen. El Malay Rachamim, compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Max Joseph Katz, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let him find refuge in your eternal presence, and let his soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is his inheritance. May he rest in peace. And let us say, Amen.
one of the most important things that we can do in our tradition is help with a burial, because it's a mitzvah, it's a commandment, it's a good deed that can never be repaid. We're doing it out of our own free will. So usually we use a shovel. I see there's gloves, so you can use gloves. I'll ask the family to go first, and we take 3 shovels worth of dirt. The first shovel, you do it with the back of the shovel, so that we're not doing it by the typical or customary way of doing it. We don't want it to feel normal. And then the second and third shovels work, you do it in the typical way that you would use a shovel. And we don't pass the shovel from person to person. You put the shovel back in the dirt. And if you don't want to use gloves, then you can just use your hands as well. So you do 3, and then you put the shovel back in, and we will conclude with the mourner's Kaddish when everyone has gotten a turn that would like one. So I'll ask the family to go first, and then everyone else can take a turn.
Anyone else would like to participate may do so from either side of the mountain burn. thought I had more people, but thank you.
We'll now conclude with the mourner's Kaddish. And the mourner's Kaddish can be found in the back of your pamphlet. Yitgadal, Yitgadak, Shemei Rabbah, Bamua, Dibrach, Ute, Lamif Machute, V'chayachon, Uvimechon, V'chai Dechol Beit Yisrael, V'agawa Uzman Kariv, V'yimru, Amen. Yehi Shmei Rabbah, Mevarach, Ve'lam Umeo Maya. Yiparach, Yistabach, Yisahar, V'bonan V'naseh, Yitadar, V'taleh, V'talal, Shmei Dukusha, B'richu, Le'ela, Min Kol Birchata, V'shirata, Tushachata, V'nefachata, Da'amiran, V'amala, V'yimru, Amen. Yehi Shlama Rabba, Min Shemaya, V'chayim Aleinu, V'al Kol Yisrael, V'yimru, Amen. Osek Shalom B'mramav, Huya Osek Shalom, Aleinu, V'al Kol Yisrael, V'yimru, Amen.
Our services here today are now concluded. We will ask that everyone please return to your cars and please stay safe.